So now I'd like to invite our second presenter, Randima Fernando. Randima helps tech companies, NGOs, and policymakers navigate the intersection of technology, ethics, mindfulness, and social good. He co-founded and served as executive director of the Center for Humane Technology, which influenced global awareness of extractive tech and human alternatives, including the Emmy-winning documentary, The Social Dilemma. Previously, Randima managed award-winning projects at NVIDIA and was a founding board member of the NVIDIA Foundation. Okay, he also led Mindful Schools, a nonprofit featured in Time magazine, teaching mindfulness to millions. And also, Randima has presented to hundreds of employees across the US government on AI. He was born in Sri Lanka and grew up in the Philippines as his father managed the Energy East at ADB. And he's a lifelong Buddhist and board member of Spirit Rock Meditation Center. So over to you, Randima.
All right. Can you hear me? You're good? Okay. Great. Hi, everyone. It is an honor to be here with you today. My goal is to share a very high-level picture of the AI situation and how we can navigate it responsibly. There's so much to say in very little time, so I apologize in advance for moving quickly today. I can go into much more detail later, but let's jump in. Here's the agenda, quick. We can skip this. Okay, so let's start by looking at AI's capabilities, both the benefits and the harms, so we can build some shared understanding together. As we will see, AI brings amazing capabilities, but that also means we have to be thoughtful about its consequences. And here's a key principle, is that more general purpose technology requires more care to disentangle the benefits from the harms. One other principle, as we dive into all this, this is helpful for building intuition for what AI is good at versus not. AI learns patterns in training data, and it extrapolates from those patterns in new situations. It turns out life is full of patterns, and a lot of what we consider to be intelligence is actually pattern recognition. And on top of this, AI models are continuously improving in areas like reasoning and logic. So most people were introduced to modern AI through ChatGPT and large language models. This type of AI is very capable at everything to do with words, from writing, stories, poems, essays, conversations, debates, and you can even converse with it with your voice, and it will talk back. With the rise of chatbots, we've also seen the rise of various harms. It's a long list, but there are just 4 examples here. As you'll see, the stakes are very high, and this is a recurring theme. As we talk about AI's capabilities, I'll also show you some of the harms on slides with the red background, like this one. AI can make high-quality images of all kinds. Here are some examples from Midjourney. You can see objects, people of different ages, ethnicities, genders, food, cartoon sketches, art, and more. All of these are accessible from around the world, right? These technologies at low cost. The flip side of these amazing images is that we can also synthesize fake images, of course. Here's an example that's a very accurate, fully customizable California driver's license used by criminals. And of course, there are plenty of fake photos of important leaders, celebrities, athletes, you name it. I know this slide can be shocking, but it's important that you're aware of this. Many companies are competing to synthesize AI girlfriends and boyfriends. By the way, these are some of the most PG-rated examples. There's frantic work happening on high-quality 3D and video versions. It is a massive market with powerful incentives and addictive hooks. And it will have an enormous impact on relationships, societal expectations, misogyny, and loneliness. And of course, the men look very different from the women. As usual, the harms here will not be evenly distributed across society. And so our actions and our thinking needs to account for that. New AI-generated influencers will easily replace humans. AI influencers will also develop relationships with you and use those relationships to achieve goals, like selling products or manipulating your vote or behavior. And these effects aren't just limited to adults. Kids will also be affected by AI-generated influencers. It's even easier to influence kids. You can take a photo of anything and ask AI questions about it. A student can ask ChatGPT for help with the cell diagram, and the AI will adapt its language level appropriately if you tell it what grade you are. But as we start to rely on these technologies at scale, we can also run into trouble. Real-world systems often lag in model training and data sets, for example, or they can fail in other ways with horrific consequences. We can train AI on fMRIs to understand complex thinking patterns. And here's an example of a simple externally wearable EEG, which allows researchers to read thought patterns with some accuracy without any invasive brain procedure. Brain reading technology is particularly dystopian when it's misapplied, whether it's by governments or by companies. These aren't applications we want to see, but misaligned incentives can easily take us to those scenarios. You can ask AI to analyze and visualize data from text or tables or financials. And actually, in recent months, the models have gotten a lot more accurate at this, even though you should still check for hallucinations when you use them. The latest AI models are also great at common coding tasks. You can upload a drawing or an image of something you want to build, and it will generate the code for you. Similar capabilities can be used for drug discovery, but you can also flip them and do harm, right? An AI generated 40,000 toxic molecules in 6 hours, including VX nerve agent. Stock markets are another example of complex patterns that AI can learn, and everyone's racing to do that. But you can also exploit them in many ways. So again, the flip side. GPT-o1, OpenAI's latest model, has much stronger reasoning capabilities. It actually scored an IQ of 120, which places it well above an average human. And GPT-5, which should have orders of magnitude more resources in its training, is likely to be just months away. More intelligent models also find creative ways to solve problems. Sometimes that's awesome. But they often find that it's advantageous to gather power and resources, to keep themselves active, and to find gaps in the rules that they're given. Models are also becoming increasingly persuasive. In a recent study, GPT-4 was already judged as more human than a human by other humans in a blind test. And there are, of course, military applications too, right? Like autonomous drones or chatbots that help you evaluate attack options and trade-offs. AI can generate songs that are indiscernible from mainstream songs, and we can reproduce voices well with just 3 seconds of audio. I'll play an example where you'll notice that there isn't any audible difference at the seam between the first 3 seconds, which is the source audio, and the artificially generated speech that follows.
Our first impressions of people are, in 9 cases out of 10, mere spectacle reflections of the actuality.
So it just sounds continuous. And this technology has already been used for kidnapping ransoms and other money-making or hacking scams. It's hard to say no when your child or grandchild is pleading for help in their own voice. This one is amazing. All you have to do is give it one photo and an audio clip, and it then generates incredibly realistic facial expressions and animation.
A girl asked me, she was like, babe, what's your love language? I'm like, what? She's like, your love language. Like, how do you convey love to your partners and loved ones? Like, for example, a love language could be words of affirmation.
This is very cool, right? But when you think about it, there aren't as many truly helpful applications. They're just fun and kind of cool. On the flip side, it's really easy to imagine countless ways to use this maliciously, right? A finance worker at a multinational firm was tricked into paying out $25 million to fraudsters who use sophisticated deepfakes on a conference call. And then there's non-consensual deepfake pornography, 95% of which affects women. This has affected the lives of ordinary people, famous people, and even middle school students. In September 2023, over 24 million users engaged with nudification apps. That number has probably gone up quite a bit. These images are from a disturbing video generated with Grok 2, which has fewer restrictions than many competing video generators. Content like this has huge implications for elections, especially when combined with engagement-based viral amplification on social media platforms. Now let me show you AI video generation from OpenAI's Sora, which is kind of the best one out there. Soon we will be able to generate entire movies, TV shows, and new virtual environments to walk around in. And mirroring these positive capabilities are huge challenges around evidence, trust, manipulation, fraud, disinformation, you name it. And huge impacts on the creative professions, like everyone who works with video or TV or film or images and music. Filmmaker Tyler Perry saw Sora and halted an $800 million studio expansion. Meanwhile, there are still major copyright questions around AI text, audio, and video tools. How should ownership, credit, and monetization work when AI trains on human creations and then makes the human creators obsolete? That remains to be seen. In medicine, AI is doing wonders because it can analyze MRIs, CTs, X-rays really well, because it tends to fit patterns really well, and there are breakthroughs in this almost every week. This prosthetic limb learns patterns of motor nerve activation, allowing the user to direct the limb with just their mind. AI-based weather forecasting extrapolates patterns in its training data without complex simulations, which makes it much faster and cheaper once the model is trained. Polis is an example of AI helping to create more representative, democratic decision-making by identifying areas of consensus. We will need technology like this to upgrade governance to match the pace of technological change. I also want to share a few examples from robotics. Chipotle introduced a burrito bowl making robot, all while their TV ads emphasize the importance of the human touch. Amazon has humanoid robots in their warehouses, with workers' unions claiming that human jobs are being lost to automation. Robots are increasing in dexterity as well. Here's a table tennis robot. I won't play the video because we don't have time, but I will play this one. There's a robot doing push-ups. Notice how balanced it is as it stands up. This is an example of something that was very difficult to do until recently. Companies like BMW are deploying advanced general-purpose robots like Figaro 2 in their manufacturing plants. So, clearly, there is an overwhelming set of benefits and harms. So how should we make sense of all this? I want to bring back this slide because its message is probably much clearer now. You can see the entanglement. General purpose AI and robotics will transform the entire global economy, the whole $105 trillion, because they are now being useful for almost every task. From retail to finance or manufacturing to crops, it is easy to imagine how the new AI and robotics capabilities we've seen just today translate to many areas across the global economy, especially as AI and robotics become more capable and reliable. In every era, wealth and power have concentrated in the hands of whoever controlled key resources. But there are three big differences in the automation revolution. One is automation is the ability to build everything else, to take on work involving cognitive and physical tasks. Two, As far as I can tell, there isn't any major revolution to jump to. It's always hard to see them, but no one has identified what that might be. And in fact, Sam Altman has been very direct about it, saying jobs are definitely going to go away, full stop. Third is the speed at which all of this is going to happen. Each revolution is faster than the last, and this one is going to be very quick. The companies driving the automation revolution have their eyes on huge chunks of the global economy, not hundreds of billions or even $1 trillion in valuation, bigger. Figure AI's website says it very directly. If we're successful, we'll have the potential to positively impact humanity and to build the largest company on the planet. To be clear, none of this is about evil companies trying to take over the economy. This is all a natural extension of the economic incentives we've set up. When you have general purpose technologies, most companies just don't need to exist. And that could be fine, as long as vast numbers of people are not left behind and all of the advancement actually leads to better lives for everyone. The automation is already happening, driven by the incentive to grow and maximize productivity while reducing costs. Naturally, companies will be supportive of their human employees until they no longer need them. Here's a case study. Sumit Shah was running a large e-commerce company that introduced AI customer service chatbots to compete better. Resolution time went from 133 minutes to 3 minutes. Customer support costs reduced by 85% as they laid off 90% of their human support team. This is all happening now. Sometimes people assume that big companies will be slow to adopt new AI advances, but general purpose AI is much easier to swap out and upgrade than previous technologies. And that's true of both enterprise products and robots. The automation revolution will be the largest power and capital concentration in history. We are already seeing this. The largest tech firms' market caps are already greater than many nations. And as power and capital concentrate, GDP becomes a highly inaccurate measure of citizen well-being. It was never intended to be such a highly weighted measure of success anyway. But now we really must measure success differently, or we will make the wrong decisions. It's a complex mix of conditions, and if we zoom out, it's clear that if we don't pair all of this exponential improvement in AI technology with the requisite wisdom, we risk a potentially catastrophic mix of conditions. We have frenetic innovation, synthetic media that we can't trust, distributed access where malicious actors have incredible new tools at their fingertips. Many of them are open source, so it's really easy to get access, and rising inequity. And inequality itself is a catastrophic risk because it breaks the functioning of economic systems and democracy. So next, let's talk a little bit about competition and incentives. Competition in our economic system has, of course, brought us amazing progress, including with AI. But competition only benefits citizens when we set the right rules for the game. So for example, we don't want to addict or harm a whole generation of kids, but we also want to allow experimentation and allow the best products to win. People sometimes say, the market will automatically find solutions to the harms. That's only true if we measure the harms, if we can measure the harms, and then price them correctly. Now, unfortunately, companies have direct incentives to make this challenging, and we see this problem all the time, especially in technology, where the rollout of new products vastly outpaces our ability to study and price their implications accurately. So how do we do it? The bottom line is we have to connect harms back to company balance sheets. This is the key point. Then we get all of the magic in our economic system, all the magic around price, to help us bind power and responsibility. Because when price doesn't account for harms, accelerated competition destroys the ecological, physical, mental, and social foundations we rely on without allowing those foundations to regenerate. Next, I want to talk about incentives. Incentives are great predictors of outcomes, so we use them a lot in our analysis. Many incentives can influence behavior, and often when someone does something harmful, these incentives, like on this slide, are usually the hidden cost or some manipulation of them. We need to make sure our incentives drive competition on the right issues. What you don't want are broken incentives that give us races to the bottom, where competitors engage in harmful behavior, not because they want to, but because they'll lose if they don't. So even people who are well-meaning often end up trapped in these kinds of misaligned incentives and races to the bottom. The AI situation lands on top of the social media landscape we already have. The race for engagement incentivized by a misaligned advertising-based business model unleashed all sorts of problems across society. Watch The Social Dilemma if you don't believe me, or look at any kid. And they are mostly accelerated by more powerful AI, all of these problems. Now, companies are in a race to deploy increasingly capable AI all across society, far beyond social media. And this is driven by an incentive to capture market share. And there's another incentive, which is to reach the holy grail of artificial general intelligence, which confers exponentially increasing advantages to the companies that achieve it. Building on the landscape of existing harms, we are opening up many more harms when we deploy AI without investments in safety that match our investments in innovation and deployment. People often talk about the tension between innovation and responsibility, like they're enemies. But that's only because we're defining innovation incorrectly most of the time. Innovation has to be beneficial to society, simple. Otherwise, it's just iteration, and all of us end up as the test subjects. This is a map for how we can escape the AI race to the bottom dynamics and to ensure that AI is actually working in harmony with humanity's best interests. This is a whole talk in itself. There's all kinds of detail in each of these boxes. And I can go into much more detail in a separate discussion. So how do we get as many of the benefits as possible without the harms? Most of all, we need to keep our eyes on the right prizes, like the ones on this slide. But you will notice that many discussions leave these out, like you just don't hear about them as much as we should. And that's why I want to emphasize them today. I'll talk about this next slide in the panel. And I wanted to close by saying that the ADB, for example, could provide a technical assistance evaluation of AI's impact along the lines of what I've described here on this slide for all of its member nations. So for example, you could create an AI SWOT per country, right? So just like you do for a company, you look at the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and really look at all the nuances that intersect with your country's DNA. You have to apply a systems lens in any of this analysis. Which forces and incentives are dominating? Which business models are driving development? Because it leads you to the patterns that are actually going to play out, as opposed to some sort of idealistic vision that isn't going to actually happen. How can predictable negative externalities be brought back on balance sheets? As I showed, there's lots of ways to do it. How do you plan to do it, right? And that's different for each country. Note that risk reward varies widely across different AI use cases. In some cases, we want to be pretty lax about it, right? We want to say, hey, we want to be permissive because there's not that much risk. In other areas, there's a lot of risk, and so we want to be much more careful. And then ask, what effects will AI have on all of those things I listed? Basic needs, jobs, inequality, the quality of our information, the quality of our environment, mental health, youth development, right? All of these things. And culture and values. These technologies change culture when they are deployed. So we have to keep all of that in mind. And with that, I will conclude. There's so much more to say, but I will stop here. Thank you so much for your time and attention. Happy to take questions.